to get Darren up here, because he's such a good looking dude as well, but I thought it would be a good idea to get Darren up here because obviously our focus, my focus is in the private, is on the private trusts. Darren's dealing with the public side of trust, and I thought it would be a good balance to let Darren have his say, you know.
Give me 2 seconds until then I'll take over.
Yeah, that's fine, that's fine. He's got a weak bladder as well, so. Don't take him
after your intro.
Don't take him like long cards on me.
See you all again.
Thank you, Rob.
Good evening, good evening. It's nice to see a crowd like this because often these meets at the pub tonight, it's very quiet in here. Honestly, you lot. Right. Let me start by sort of introducing myself because I wasn't sure what to do with this group tonight. I'll have to admit I'm a bit distracted because I've been doing a bunch of other events recently, not my usual public trust stuff. I'll explain to you tonight. Is everybody here familiar with the People's Public Trust as an idea?
Yeah.
How can I have a show of hands? 1, 2, 3. Okay, a few people. Right, so. And there are people here who consider themselves Freemen. A couple. A few, anybody sovereigns? Anybody just unidentified, just learning as they go sort of thing? Right, okay. And is any, can I just get a show, has anybody seen any of my videos on YouTube or any of that sort of stuff? Just a couple, okay. Right, my kind of journey into the whole Freeman sovereign movement, it's fair to give you a sort of a background for it because that's obviously why you're all here, isn't it? Yeah, you know, you're involved in little challenges yourselves, like, you know, maybe a little driving matter, council tax, mortgage, something like that. Yeah, okay. I got into this as a bit of a sideline because my stuff is actually about self-development, awareness, empowerment, things like that, wider social issues as well. And this I got into because I saw people facing challenges within themselves. They were going out there, they were facing up to authority, they were trying to get a sense of their own natural empowerment, what the concept of sovereignty is about. So I'll talk to you a bit about that tonight, to just sort of introduce you to where I'm coming from with it. So it was a sideline for me, and my normal subjects are kind of a bit odd. They're things like language and relationships and gender and perception and things like that. So this was very much a side branch, but what got me into it was the language side of it, because obviously the whole Freeman sovereign thing is about the language, isn't it, this whole legalese thing. And so I saw people exploring the power of language in law and finding a sense of power through it. And I've been doing this in my events for years, so you know, just as an example, you have a look at the clothes that a guy has to wear to go to work, and you look at the symbols of what's actually there. You know, so people have been looking at this idea of enslavement of people or oppression, and they're thinking they have to look for some complex, deep rabbit hole. You have the white rabbit, we have legalese, we have all these complex conspiracy theories, and I've been going for almost a decade saying this nonsense. You don't need to look at any of that. It's staring you in the face. So if I want you to picture a guy going to work in the city or in a town or whatever, and I want you to look at what he's wearing, and what do you call the part around his neck here? A collar, and around his wrists?
Cuffs.
Cuffs, exactly, okay, and here? It's a tie, okay. So when you want to think about collar, cuffs and a tie, have you come across this before? Okay, well, I've been doing this for 10 years. But it's the first example, and this is an example of how, when I talk about the idea that all our words are spells, it's an example of how what we're dealing with is a whole bunch of mispointed spells. And that's what legalese is about. It's a whole bunch of spells that you thought meant one thing and you're learning that they don't. And as you unravel that, what you're getting back is power and awareness. You know, that's literally it. And it's what you feel as awareness, power, you know, responsibility, all these things. Another example of, so you may have heard this one as well, but again it's another one that I highlighted many moons ago, and that's the sign over a door that we're told means way in. But it actually doesn't say that. And I want you to picture what are the signs over doors that say way in, what are the variations on it. So there's way in, thank you, somebody's seen it, yeah. And so there's a word that we say, we think entrance, don't we? But it doesn't say entrance, does it? What does it say if you read it properly? It says entrance. So if you think about all these shops where you're going by, and you know what's in them, you have all these promises of satisfaction, of success, of attractability, of sexual satisfaction, of all these different things, and do any of them deliver on their promises? Well, no, not really, do they? And it's because we just put into a a trance by the combination of media, marketing, presentation, all these things and all of our conditioning, and we're just driven to go back to these various establishments to try and have our needs met when they can never actually meet our needs in there. And so that's sort of like give you a sense of my sort of wider approach on this, and that's just the beginning to the stuff I do in language. It goes much further than that. But that's a talk for another day. That's just to give you a sense of actually why I was so interested in what was going on in the Freeman movement, and the sovereign movement, because I see it as a form of mental healing. You know, it really is what it is. We're all familiar with the concept of physical healing, of physical unwellness. We're familiar with the concept of, you know, emotional unhappiness or dissatisfaction, or having to work on our emotional or relationship issues. They've all been kind of accepted for the last 50 or 60 years, although it wasn't really before then. Whereas now what we're dealing with is actually this whole idea of what's going on in our heads, because most of us don't realise, or maybe not willing to admit, how often we're in conflict as we're going through our life. Most of us we're mentally in conflict during the day, aren't we? You know, part of you wants to eat chocolate, part of you wants to have a go at you for wanting to do it. Part of you wants to live in a tidy house, part of you can't be bothered cleaning it up. Sound familiar? You know? These are little humdrum things that we all live with all the time, you know. There's more than one I in here, you know, and there is, and this is the point, we're made up of different aspects, and our whole life journey is about understanding them and their effect on us. And this sovereign Freeman movement is actually one of the inroads into the actual truth of what it is to be a master of yourself. And that obviously brings me to what I consider to be sort of like my little piece of the Freeman or sovereign puzzle for this country anyway. And it was quite a few years ago, people were talking about the legal fiction and the corporation and all these sorts of things, and I'd be in court with people watching them trying this and watching the heads in the room spin. And it was because the Freemen had invented a term for a concept that they hadn't told everybody on the other side about, which is exactly what they'd done to us with legalese. Okay, they invented terms, changed them, didn't tell us what they meant. And we've kind of done that with this whole "my name's a corporation" thing, because really, you know, it's just a term for a concept. So I started looking at the words and the language that we were actually using. So collar cuff tie isn't something I've invented. It's not a conspiracy. You can talk to your mum about it, you can talk to your gran about it, you know. You might not be able to talk to her about the Queen being a 7-foot reptile or something like that if you're looking to, but, you know, this you can. So I'm very much about what's staring us in the face. We don't need to look for magical solutions. We don't need to import big, you know, alien invasions or whatever. The stuff that we really need is staring us in the face. Collar cuff tie and trans, things like that. Those of you that haven't heard of that before, you'll never see those things again. And I can suggest to you that, you know, if I've just given you those as 2 soundbite snippets in a matter of seconds, then, you know, the doorway that lies behind that and where it goes is much, much bigger and much more powerful than just those little indicators. And it's all about stuff that's actually staring us in the face. And we'll get to the people's public trust in a bit, which is another thing that's staring us in the face. Rob said I invented it, but I haven't. I've just highlighted something that's already there, like the collar cuff tie thing, so I can't take credit for it. But we'll come on to that. I always have to update you, so maybe Rob's told you guys or somebody else has told you guys about the whole title thing, because that was what got me into it. You know, I had people talking about, well, the Mister's a legal fiction, it's a corporation and all the rest of it, and I said, well, has anybody looked it up? And of course they had looked it up, but the point is Mister isn't in legal dictionaries, because it's not actually a proper word, as we know it. So it's now in the dictionaries as whatever, but archaically, Mister wasn't there. The word mystery was, so it's Mister with a Y on the end. And mystery was a business or a trade, just those 4 words, a business, semicolon, a trade. So for those of you that were looking to say that your name was a corporation or legal fiction, you could just refer to the legal dictionary under mystery as opposed to making up new terms, you know. So again, it's anchoring it in the real in terms of what's right in front of us. So anyway, you know, that got me looking at the other titles. Sorry if I'm speaking a bit quick for some of you, it's just that I'm aware of the time and I've got to get back quite early tonight because my missus is on a waking night, so she's on night shift and I've got to get back in handover because I'm on baby watch after that. So anyway, I looked at the other titles, and obviously Mrs. isn't in there, and in fact Mrs. isn't even a word. If you look at it, it's just MRS. We don't say it properly, do we? It's like entrance, we don't say it properly. And what it's actually missing is it's missing an apostrophe, and Mrs. should be Misters. And it's Misters, i.e. belonging to the business. So women never really got a proper title of their own, and that's revealed by looking at the title they have before they're married, and that's the title Miss. And obviously if you picture a form where you put title, forename, surname, and you put Miss under title, that means Miss this. Miss, yeah, title Miss. Don't have one of them. Okay, so when women went for equal rights and the right to vote, the right to work and all the rest of it, title never caught up. So as they were for the last century going on about how they live in a man's world and stuff like that, they were absolutely right, you know, as far as commerce is concerned anyway. So obviously it's an interesting thing, title, because all those titles were given to you. Okay, they're all given to you by somebody else. There's another title that the guys in the room had. Prior to they had the Mr. title, and when they were bound by that title, they weren't subject to statutory obligations. They were only pulled up if they broke the common law, the law of the land, and they were told it was because they were a minor. But if you look up the title Master in any legal dictionary in the world, I'll tell you what, it doesn't say anything about being under 16 in any of them that I've found. Okay, now the title Master, if you do look it up, it says something a bit different. Master is things like, the master is always the principal, but a principal is not always a master. Does anybody know what a principal is? It's the creditor, it's the lender. Not the debtor, the lender. So, the Mr. is the debtor. The master is the creditor, the lender. So, other definitions of master. A master is captain of his vessel, i.e. a mast heir. So, for those of you that are into admiralty or commerce, could be a useful title in that arena as well. A master is one who has control, one who employs another for the conduct of services, and has control of the conduct of that other. And that was the one that got me interested, because obviously we aren't the only ones running around with titles and language and words that we use all the time. So, excuse me, it's that cider coming back on me there. What interested me was the problems that most of us are experiencing are through our contact with authority. And these so-called authority people are supposed to be, I thought, our employees. And this is obviously the arena of the public servant, or the civil servant. And it's quite funny that at times when they're supposed to be behaving like our employees, why is it that we're the ones jumping to their tune? And it's because they've flipped the tables on us. While we are the Misters, the Misses and the Misses, we are underneath public authority. We're not the employer, we are the business or a trade category. So we are in the commercial world at that point. So we are subject to statute, etc., while we use those titles, as far as I'm concerned. So it kind of simplifies it all a bit when you put it in the realm of title, and it makes sense that, you know, in this land of title, in this heartland of law and legislation as we kind of know it, that it would boil down to title at the end of the day. And so what I've been doing for the last few years with people is about recapturing the master title in relation to our public servants, because if they're the servant, then who's the master, who's the employer? It's us, isn't it? But it's about how do we reassert that? Because my problem with the Freeman movement was it was very us and them. It's very much about feeling jilted, feeling oppressed and all the rest of it, and as we wake up to that, it's all of a sudden, oh, I don't want anything more to do with it, that's it, nothing to do with it, you know. And I saw the Freeman movement as being very much about abandoning everything that society had worked for just because there's a few nutters currently at the helm. And when I thought it through with the baby on the way and speaking to people who had families and all the rest of it, the Freeman movement to me had a bit of a problem with it, and that was if you thought it all the way through, it was Tory heaven. It was conservative bliss. Because if you think that everybody right now today was a Freeman, right now, right here, right now, nobody went to work unless they absolutely wanted to, then what we would be doing is we'd be waiting around until somebody decided they wanted to run this section of road, somebody decided they wanted to run this school, somebody decided they wanted to run this library, this swimming pool, whatever, and then they charged whatever rates they wanted for it because they were a sovereign free person or whatever, and hey, isn't that what the Tories won? All the way through. It was section of road privately owned, privately maintained, blah, 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 privately charged. So there we were thinking that we were breaking from infrastructure when in actual fact, you know, it hadn't been thought through. It was just a reaction. Just a reaction. Do we really want to abandon infrastructure? Do we really want to reinvent courts? Do we really want to reinvent, okay, decide who's going to look after the road. I don't. That's what I realised. And all I'm doing is, when I'm speaking to people, is asking them, do you really want to do that? That's what's at the end of this whole Freeman road. And you know, I've got many Freeman friends and I love them dearly, and I have the infrastructure debate with them a lot, because even the ones that want to talk about setting up communities, setting up private trust lands and all the rest of it, they still need to interact with infrastructure. No matter how off-grid they want to get, they still have to import their solar panel parts from somewhere. They can't make them themselves. So one way or another, they're dependent on our infrastructure. And that's the hard truth I want them to look at, because it then means that their current solution isn't a solution. Okay, it's something you can do maybe if you're single and don't have a family to look after and don't have too many other needs and obligations, then maybe you can go down this free man living on the land route, which most of the people I know who have done it full on, full blown, they're in exactly that situation. They are bachelors, they are or single ladies, and they don't have these obligations and all the rest of it. So it's not a solution for everybody, and that means for me, I dealt with a lot of bills, parking things, council tax, water, gas and electric, all the rest of it. I've played with all of them over the years. Different strategies for each one. I don't believe you can use the same. I don't believe in templates. I don't believe in that sort of thing. I think it's all about playing with the uniqueness of your situation to discover what's going on. But then I realised, as I was thinking all these things through, that it was kind of simpler than people thought. People were looking at things as being one grand oppressive evil, or one grand oppressive scheme against them, or something like that, you know, and it applied to both councils, police, courts, as well as corporations and big business. And I kind of realised that that's not actually true, because there's actually three levels in there, because you've got us the people, you've got the people that we employ or the public servants, and then you've got private business. Now, just because some governance is being privatised, which it isn't really, by the way, it's just being contracted out, it's a totally different thing. All the things are still owned by the UK, so they've not been truly privatised, they're just contracted out, so keep that in mind. So, my point is that most of our issues are all to do with commercial invaders of our community, basically, selling us crap goods or shoddy whatever, or breaking down the standards in community. This is all to do with misrepresentation. Because if you had people who actually represented the well-being of your community and your family, would you have to worry about all this stuff, really? Do you think so? If you had people who actually represented the well-being of these lands and the people on it, would we have to worry about profit-driven maniacs from other lands who want to come and poison our kids and poison our families and our food?
Isn't that supposed to be what local elections are for?
And central elections, absolutely. This is the point. The point is that it's to put the battle in the right place. Why are we taking on gigantic companies that are bigger than nations, bigger than multiple nations and all the rest of it, when in actual fact, really, there's some, you know, that's a very difficult battle to win. Whereas something that's very, very winnable is to get public servants that actually represent us. And this is what's quite interesting, because one of the problems that we have when addressing authority is limited liability. So this is what people are hiding behind. You're familiar with the idea of limited liability. And what that means is, if people say, it wasn't me, I was just doing my job. I said, oh yeah, I'm not culpable for what my hands did because I'm sheltered by my job role and my magic piece of paper that gives me special powers. Okay, this is the level of spells and spelling that we're up against. I mean, when I said spells earlier, I know some of you might have thought, oh well, whatever. I really want to return to that point, because, you know, what's a spell? It's a word or phrase of magical effect, isn't it? And when you all think about words that have been said to you in a relationship or in the playground or by friends or whatever, which have hurt, offended, insulted or you know, negated or neglected you in some way, and I want you to think about how that's actually made you feel. And I guarantee you that every single one of you in here today is censoring yourself because of words said to you in such fashion. Every one of you thinks less of yourself, beats yourself up, treats yourself less than you should, and others around you as a result of words said to you. Does anybody want to deny it? How much more magic do you want? Now, what we're up against in terms of dealing with state and authority isn't you getting your legal terminology right. What you're up against is their certainty that they're right. That's what you're trying to get through to. That's what you're what your methods are actually for What we're trying to do with the legal side is learning the right code that will make them think that we are credible. But really what we're trying to do is get through. And anyway, digressing there. The point is that it's an important point about the special powers thing and magic spells, because what's brought you all here today and what's got you all doing what you're doing is the effect of these little spells on pieces of paper that come through the door. Okay, these little bits of paper come through the door, they've got these little special magic words on them that make you feel a particular way. They're invading your sovereignty, because your sovereignty is your space here. It's your inner peace, your well-being, your unshakable state of centered calm, which is there. You may not have tasted it for a while, some of you, but it is there. And the point is that these magic bits of paper drop through the door and they affect it, don't they? Okay, maybe not now, that's the point, because that's the challenge in the battle of sovereignty. But it's a journey. It's an absolute journey. You know, and it's not over for any of us because we've not got the communities that we want yet. But the point is that what we're doing with the growing journey of authority and empowerment is not letting these things affect you in the way that they once did. But that's really just the sort of beginning of it, because then we've got to deal with other people who still believe them. So what we're up against is actually people who have these little magic pieces of paper and they put on these special clothes, these special Superman uniforms that make them think they've got special powers. Okay? Some of them will wear black, some of them will wear other things, some will put on funny hats and funny wigs and all the rest of it. Completely mentally ill in my opinion. Different story. They don't mean it, you know. But it's the power of the endemic social conditioning spell trap that we're all under. And it's just one part of it. It's just one part of it. There's other parts to it. You know, the law is just one element of it. That's the incredible thing. So one of the other things I like to do when I speak to groups is to help them remember to keep all this stuff in context. Because a lot of us are taking on too many battles in this stuff and letting a lot of other aspects of our life be sacrificed. And it's like, this needs to be kept in its context as well, you know, put in its rightful place in terms of just managing your interaction with state, managing what's going on, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, okay. So, masters in relation to public servants. Does that make sense to everybody? Yes. What's interesting is that I think, my suspicion is that the master title and other things like it are part of the British Constitution. Not the group, the reality. And obviously what you find about the British Constitution is they always tell you it's unwritten, isn't it? It's unwritten, the British Constitution. It's unwritten. It's an assembly of acts and, you know, case law and blah, 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 but nobody can point you to all of them. Now, it's more than that though, because there was a great presentation, and I can't remember who it was by. It was the only person I've ever seen do a proper good presentation on the British Constitution. And he made the excellent point in it that basically, the reason there isn't a British Constitution is because we all bloody well know it, because we're British. We started half of this stuff, you know, and it's written, it oozes through us, it oozes through our land, it oozes in our culture. You don't need to tell us, it's already there. And I think the master title is one example of that. The collars, the cuffs and ties is another example of that. We have a graded collar system. You have blue collar, white collar, dog collar. Police are all known by their collar number, all this sort of stuff. It's all very organised. And again, it's all staring you in the face. You could say any of these things to your granny, you know, and explain it to her and she would get it. This is my point with this stuff as well. I'm not making this up. I'm not painting you some kind of conspiracy. I'm trying to show you the way to be as effective as possible when we're taking on some of these challenges. Because, sorry, I'm wandering around here. But I suppose in these sort of times of, you know, has everybody noticed that their life getting a bit, you know, more intense? Have you kind of noticed that? Did you notice that last year was pretty amazing for convergence, divergence, manifestation, amazing different things? Did anybody notice that? Well, it's certainly, I've kind of seen it increase this year, and people's lives be filled with intensity and emotional challenge and all sorts of stuff being brought up for them. And your time has never been such a commodity, and neither has your attention, because your attention is always taken by something. And my point with a lot of this stuff is, how much of your time and attention do you want it to take? And what is it you actually want out of it at the end? And how much are you putting into it at the minute? Because I see this as being really quite incredible times of actual creation, actual amazing things happening and all the rest of it. And I'm just a bit worried that we're all thinking a bit too much about some of this stuff. Just a bit too much. And just about putting it in context. keeping it in its place. Thank you very much. Because I think, we're the most mentally excited branch of our species that have ever walked this planet. We're the most stimulated mentally ever. You guys are more bombarded from morning till night than anybody else that's ever walked the planet. From TV, billboards, advertising, internet, all sorts of stuff, the conversational stuff, you're inundated. And your body feels it, and it manifests it in the form of feelings of intensity, of stress, of overloaded, of frustration, of powerlessness, of all these sorts of things. These are all manifestations of just being surrounded by so much stuff. Now, another couple of spells to consider is to do the ones where we get most of our information. And obviously, what do we call it? The two terms that we have for the internet are the net and the web. Now we need to think about those words for a minute. The net and the web. Okay, where did the net come from? Who devised it? Who developed it? Where did it come out of?
The American military.
American military, thank you very much indeed. It was the American military. Now, obviously we know it was, for good purposes and all the rest of it. There's no security fundamentally in the internet. It's been a big issue over the years. And obviously we've all reaped great fruits from the internet. So don't get me wrong, it's the most powerful and versatile tool that we've ever been exposed to. It's the first two-way multimedia device that you've ever been able to have in your home. Before then it was always one-way. One-way, radio, television, all the rest of it. All of a sudden, internet, two-way. Amazing, and look at what it's done. It is incredible. But I just invite you to consider the terms net and web and ask how confident you are that you are the spider and the fisherman. Because I'm not sure we are. I think we might well be the fish and the fly if we don't balance that tool adequately. Because you guys are great now because you've come out and you've met and you've manifested here today. That's brilliant. Because how much time is spent just venting on forums when people used to meet? And we'll sit there and we'll stick it on Facebook, we'll spend a few hours crafting our masterpiece for the forum, we'll put it up there and, think there's our sort of, missive to the world sort of thing, and then obviously it's so busy that it's disappeared by 2 weeks' time or something like that. But where's all the energy gone? It's all gone onto the net. It's all trapped in the web. And yet, against that backdrop of mental excitation, massive stories, we'll come to the stories in a minute, amazing stories just now, but against that backdrop of mental excitation, the erosion of the foundations of our community continues apace. Massively so. And how much attention are we paying to that? Because it's good that everybody's here today, and obviously, most of you are fairly local to this area, but let's just say, the system, as we know it does say, go down or have some kind of collapse, which is obviously one of the big stories that we're looking at possibly happening in the near future. So let's look at what system going down means. It means food gone from the shops within 3 days. It means fuel gone within a couple of days. And it means probably power shortages and all the rest of it. So in that situation, who is going to be there? Is it going to be your codenamed buddy from the forum? Is it going to be all those people you can reach out to on Facebook that are all your like-minded community? Or is it going to be the people outside your house, your actual community? Because my concern is that we're being distracted and exploited to tell somebody else's story and to validate somebody else's world. Because it's all this legalese. Is that the story you want to be telling in your life? I don't think it is. I think we're looking to get out of the situation we've been dug into, and we're looking to protect our family and our nearest and dearest. But beyond that, what else do you actually want? I know there's some of us who are researchers, and they're the ones who I think muddle the mix sometimes. I've said this to a number of people, where it's like, because, and I went through a phase where I was asking groups, what do you want? What is it you want? What are you here for? Because for the people who are research, there's no end to their interest in law. Okay, they want to research, they want to keep going and going and going, that's fine. I found, hey, what am I doing with this nonsense in my head? I don't want it there. I've got other things I want to be thinking about and doing. And so I realised, what I wanted out of it was effective tools. So I could manage this commercial world and protect my family and, work on the community and all the rest of it. And other than that, I wanted to be getting on with my life. Got a little baby, all the rest of it. I want to be spending time with baby. Now, And don't get me wrong, all this stuff is brilliant, what's going on is brilliant, but I'm just throwing this out here because I think we should always stop and reflect when we get the chance, especially when we've been getting carried away with something for a while. And I think that with this year and the way it's going intensity-wise and with the stories, it can only really go one way. So let's look at some of these stories. I mean, they're big stories for this year, aren't they? Everything's a big story. There's no such thing as a small story anymore. It's all massive, isn't it? We've got, what, potential World War III looming is a possibly very realistic story. We've got potential alien invasion, faked or real, coming up for the Olympics, Project Bluebeam or whatever, for those of you who are interested in it or who have heard of it. Have people heard of it?
No.
Yeah.
Some yeses, some no's, yeah, Project Bluebeam, yeah. We've got potential terrorist, false flag attacks, people heard of that one? Yeah, okay, there's a potential story. What other ones? We've got, you know, Mayan cosmogenesis and spontaneous ascension. Come across that one? Giggles over there, yes. Of course you have, absolutely. It's out there, 2012, all that sort of thing. Mayan transformation, blah de blah. But these are big stories, aren't they? They're pretty big. You know, how much bigger can they get? You can't really get any bigger than that. So that actually tells us one of two things. They're either going to happen, which I don't think all of them can happen. They could. That'd be a wild ride, wouldn't it, if they all happened? Are we all prepared for that? Are we all in control of our space and all the rest of it to manage that one? I don't think it's going to be all of them, I really don't. I'm not really sure it's going to be any of them, to be quite honest, apart from the lunatics, you know, continuing with the war because they're mental. But other than that, I'm really not sure. And my concern is that for how much excitement and anticipation that people have put into these potential events, and how much they are withholding their activity now because of their anticipation of those events. And my concern is that come February 2013, should there be a February 2013, maybe we'll call it something else, you know, I don't know. But should there be, my concern is that if we haven't manifested these story bubbles, are we okay? Are our foundations okay? Are we on top of our relationships? Are we on top of our community stuff? Are we keeping track of things? You know, are we maintaining responsibility for our life and our kind of obligations to our nearest and dearest? And it's just a rhetorical question, just as let's pause in this mad helter-skelter frenzy that we've all been on these last few years, or however many it's been, and just assimilate and double check. When you put it in that context, it's quite wild, isn't it, this level of anticipation? Because I'm beginning to be concerned that it's part of the trick, that your co-creative powers are being exploited to tell somebody else's story. Because in these amazing times, if they are indeed amazing times, and I don't think any of these stories don't say these are amazing times, I think all of them say these are amazing times. So, against the backdrop of any of those, I think it's even more important what you do with what's in here. What you do with the idea of the world that you're repeating, with the story of the world that you're telling. But if you're a co-creator of reality, I'd really like you to be thinking nice fuzzy things about you and your world, rather than big scary things that go boom or bang or, I don't know, I was trying to make an alien noise, but I don't know what noise I can do one. Yeah, whatever. My real invitation is that I would like to hear you telling your story in your head, not somebody else's. Use this stuff, whatever it is you're learning sovereign-wise, to develop your sovereignty. Absolutely, 100%. I will get into the people who don't trust in a minute. I remember that's why I was here. You know, to use your sovereignty to its fullest. That's what I really want to invest in and evoke, and I'm interested in, because that's the diversity of the world that we're in. I want everybody to just look around the room in a minute. Just look around, turn around, you guys, and look at everybody. I want all you to have a look around and see, make face contact. Does anybody see anybody who looks even remotely the same? Even remotely? Yeah, but the dress sense is clearly individual. Yeah. But that's the point, is that, you know, that's just, there's one aspect of your sovereignty. Okay, right there is the fact that every single one of you is individual and unique. That's just one tiny obvious element of it. But it's the rest of it that's been invaded. Because before any of you act, when you're making decisions, before you act, there's a whole list of things you're checking against before you decide what you're going to do. Whether you'll get away with it, whether it's polite, what people are going to think of you, how you're going to look, blah de blah, is it going to get you into trouble, all this sort of stuff. And we can feel shame, guilt, fear, self-consciousness, anxiousness, all the rest of it about doing an act when we're in a room by ourselves. Okay? You're on your own in a room, you maybe want to sing, dance, indulge in some sensual indulgence or whatever you want to do, but you can have all these feelings, and what the hell is that all about? That's your sovereignty invaded, that's the issue. The issue is what's going on in your pre-conscious mind there that's making you censor yourself even when it's only you there. That's the real challenge, and this is where, all of this stuff is a proper doorway into it. It's a real doorway with a social application, because obviously you can go out there and you can test it, and you can give yourself live examples. But I mean, it's a truly, I don't mean to chuck it into a different sort of context, but it's a truly spiritual endeavour every single one of you have undertaken. It truly is. But it's an actual, grounded, applied, proper, real thing, which makes you much more valuable than half the hippies. But it really is. This is a living social challenge that we're all up against, and it's a problem for our community. So anyway, yeah, that's enough about you guys. So all I want to say about your sovereignty and your space and what's going on is I want you to think about how invaded your sovereignty is, how invaded your space is, how invaded your storytelling power is, how much you're telling somebody else's story throughout the day, how much you're censoring yourself throughout the day in different situations. You're a different you in every group that you're in. You're a different you with your mum and dad, a different you with your kids, a different you with your friends, a different you at work, all the rest of it. That's massive censorship that's going on all the time. And all I want to say is that for this year, when things are getting more intense, and they're going to get more intense, as a virtual guarantee, just to choose carefully what you're doing with this sovereignty space of yours. Really, really choose carefully. And in some of these battles that some of you are involved in, and these authority battles that are going on, choose carefully which ones are worth pursuing. Choose carefully how much time and attention that you're going to invest in them, because we all know they tend not to go away after the first notice, do they? So you tend to be involved in a bit of a process over petty matters that can get dragged on for a long time. I've been involved with people in driving matters that have taken 2 years. And I've been sitting with the guys as we go into court for the 6th time going, this is deprivation of liberty. It's not the sentence, it's not the fine, it's having to turn up at their bloody establishments and be made to sit all day until they can be bothered seeing you. There we go, there's a day, there we go, a day served time. I've not been charged with anything. But that's virtually, to me, I now consider that a day inside.
Already punished.
Already punished, exactly. My liberty has been deprived for a day, plus costs that I'm not going to get back. I now choose carefully which ones I engage in for maximum effect. And this is where now, so anyway, yeah, choose carefully, please, 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 because I have a vested interest. I want you guys to be telling a good story, because that means if we really are co-creators, and if those stories really are true, then I want you to be thinking nice, warm, fuzzy, inclusive, loving, nice thoughts, and not scary, terror, boom, bang, hellish, nutters ones, if possible. So, on to the people's public trust. So, my issue with this whole limited liability thing was that it's crazy for one thing. How can any adult human being claim to not have responsibility for their actions, which is essentially what we're dealing with here. We're dealing with people who are hiding behind their job roles, they're hiding behind their corporations, they're hiding behind all these different things. And as I said to quite a few companies, and still do, limited liability is a position of diminished responsibility. And diminished responsibility used to only be allowed, and I think, virtually still is diminished responsibility. It's only really for children and the mentally unwell, or people who are having a mental or emotional crisis, which are you. Because otherwise, there's no excuse for limited liability when people are possibly being damaged by your actions. That's why every single company and every single corporate practitioner requires insurance. Public liability insurance. Because they are a liability to the public. They're a liability, every one of them is a liability. And we're not acting on it, we're not cashing in on it, because they're a blooming liability. And it's because of this diminished responsibility. If I gave you lot diminished responsibility and let you run amok, who knows what could go on if you felt like you could get away with stuff because it wouldn't come back on you. That's what we're dealing with. That is what we're dealing with, is people who have had that in their job roles with their special magic bits of paper that give them magic powers, and then they're believing that day in, day out for years. What do you think happens to somebody who does that day in, day out for years? For some of them, 20, 30, 40 years. Somebody has to wear his black robe and his wig and go into these weird Masonic chambers for every day for 40 years.
It's a fucking great pension for it though.
Yeah, but it said you're completely bonkers as a process, do you know what I mean? Yeah, you've got a lovely pension to spend on your own, because nobody wants to be with you. Yeah, exactly, brilliant, yeah.
Alone, you didn't on me own, what could you get up to? You're loads of money on your own.
Have really expensive fires. Obviously my issue is the fact that they all enjoy limited liability. And it's an endemic feature of the corporate world. They're all insured, they're all covered. They have to be, because this is the whole point about common law, and the whole point about your massive multi-million or trillion-pound liens, is that actual harm to a real living being cannot be quantified. If you say your injury is £10 million, who is to say it isn't? Nobody can. That's the point of some of the statutory legislation, is to set parameters or limits, and it's really because any of us could turn around and set those things on it. And so this is why they've done it. So I think there was some good intention in the way some of it was set about, but it's just been usurped by a few nutters along the way. And this is my point through all of this, is that overall, our services are not endemically bad. They're actually the best in the world. They're some of the greatest features there are. Your bins generally get picked up. Various things are dealt with generally. You know, the issue is just a few bad apples. And I'm all about, well, why don't we just deal with them instead of trying to reinvent it all? You know, can we do that? And this is where, you know, my journey has taken me. So I found that obviously this whole limited liability thing is only enjoyed in the corporate jurisdiction. It's only in the statutory jurisdiction. It isn't there in places like common law or in trust jurisdiction or things like that, or certain other jurisdictions. I'm not sure what others, but I'm sure there's others that it applies. And I realised, obviously, I was watching many friends who were taking many cases, who proper people who were putting their lives and their reputation on the line. Half of them are in jail now. People like Rusty and Mike Dobson and various folks like that. You know, they're actually serving time right now, so they've properly lost their liberty as a result of just experimenting with some of this stuff. I mean, I'll get onto Mike later on. Mike's serving as a convicted terrorist. Honestly. So, anyway, limited liability, yeah. So, at first, as I was exploring, I realised that one of the easiest ways of getting, because one of the big challenges, obviously, for Freeman was getting common law jurisdiction. So when you're in a court, how do you get common law jurisdiction? Most of them are just enforcing statute, and people were trying various code words, various sequences of spells to try and open the door to common law jurisdiction. And even though they were getting it all in the books, they weren't actually getting the successes that they wanted, because they were getting statements like a document you call an affidavit rather than your affidavit, or a document you refer to as a blah-de-blah rather than, you know, a document you refer to as a notice rather than referring to your notice. So what that's essentially doing is the courts were continually discrediting people's documents. But there's actually a reason for that, and it's actually because they're private documents, as you'll know. The private documents have no place in a court like that. That's why you should use statutory declarations. That's a statutory equivalent of an affidavit, as it were. There's various things like that where people didn't do the research right in terms of what you should bring to which arena. Theoretically, your affidavit should be fine in court, but we had a case recently of a family down in Hertfordshire where in the Crown Court, he had it absolutely categorically stated by the Crown Court that the Crown Court was purely a creature of statute. So if that's the case, as they said, if you want to hear matters of trust, you need to go to Chancery. If you want to hear matters of wherever, you have to go wherever. But they were basically adamant that it was a creature of statute, and that was it. Now, obviously, you and I know that's probably a lie, really, to be quite honest. But this is where it's going to bring us on to the issue. And the issue is that the thing that's denying us remedy isn't some massive grand conspiracy. It's the people who can give you access to remedy don't know it. court staff, people like that, they don't know they can accept your paperwork. They don't know they can instigate a private prosecution in your name, things like that. We have to be involved in a re-education process of some of these people, which requires us in a way to befriend them first rather than make enemies of them, because we need to get them on side, in a way. That's just one thing. So I'll get onto the trust in just 1 second. So yeah, anyway, I realised that obviously the easiest way to fix jurisdiction is to pick a charge that only exists in a particular jurisdiction. Okay? So if you have, there's certain charges that only exist in common law, they don't exist in statute. So like misconduct in a public office, it's not a statutory offence, it's a common law offence. So bingo, there we go. Can't possibly hear it in statute, it doesn't exist in statute. Now that case has been heard, that particular charge has been heard for an increasing number of times in the last decade. For a number of years it was heard like 4 times a year. It's rocketed up to like 12 for about the last couple of years, and it's increasing all the time. There was a couple of policemen charged with it in Yorkshire just a couple of months ago. And the great thing is it's a common law offence, there's no limited liability, it's a serious offence with up to 25 years in jail and massive fines, blah blah blah. Much better. At last a bit of accountability possibly. But it doesn't help us for most of our public servants, because how do we get them into that common law jurisdiction? Because the standards for misconduct are quite high. And this is where I kind of, a lot of us have been researching trusts. With Rob here, obviously you guys have been looking at trusts quite a lot, I would imagine. And this is what I was looking at as well. I spent quite a bit of time on trusts. And realised, of course, that in trust jurisdiction, there's no limited liability either. Trustees are always liable. And is everyone familiar with express trusts and, implied trusts and all that sort of stuff? Okay, so an express trust is a trust that everybody knows is a trust. And most trusts are that. Hey, no way, wow. Oh, glad that I do.
Oh, familiar faces.
Yeah, familiar faces indeed.
This is
Good
real
beard,
hardcore
good
by the
beard, I
way,
like it, yeah. Look at the hardcores turning up. What a chance, big beard, I love it.
So this is royalty, by the way, just...
Yeah, sovereignty, absolutely. Extensions of everybody's sovereignty appearing here. So anyway, yeah. So with trust, obviously you can sit down and you craft the paperwork and blah blah blah. But trust can be created all the time. And they can be created accidentally. Did you know that? So if I said, yes.
Do you want to borrow some money?
No, I will graciously accept a donation, sir.
I think he was trying to create a trust.
Yeah, exactly. That's why I haven't done it. If I said, my dear friend, could you pass that to Stephen, please? The moment she's accepted that, a trust is created. Okay? A trust is created straight away. If I've granted it, who's the beneficiary? Stephen is. Because he should be the beneficiary if Audrey does her job. So as long as she, as a trustee, fulfills the remit of the trust and passes the call as Stephen, no, please trust him now. Yeah. Because if she passed them straight back to me or to anybody else, what would it have been? It would have been a breach of trust. A breach of trust. Instead, he's got them you may have one.
Thank you.
Of course you can. It would have been a breach of trust, so that's how easily a trust can be created. And the point is, if I'd said afterwards, well, and Audrey hadn't given it to Stephen, she passed it on to somebody else, giving it to Rob instead, and Robin pocketed them all or something like that. And then she tried to challenge it afterwards, saying, well, we didn't have a contract, there was no contract there, show me the signature. I said, no, we had a trust. I entrusted you to pass them on, and instead you gave them to Rob and he ate all my mints, man. Did you receive it?
Yes, mate.
You can have one as well because of that, being the accused there. And so yeah, trusts are that simple. Well, they can be that simple, but not all that simple. Some of them can be very complicated, and a lot of legal heads would like to imply that trusts are very complicated. And most legal people will say, I remember studying a unit of trusts in college, and oh my goodness, they were complicated. And yeah, some of them have been made a little bit complicated, but they don't need to be. They can be as simple as what I just demonstrated there. So here's my question for you in relation to our fine public servants, and that is that R Does anybody here, please, I want this to be interactive. Are public servants trusted with the well-being of the community as being perhaps their highest priority?
Allegedly.
Does anybody think they're not? Or does anybody not think that's part of the job? Do you think it is part of the job?
It should be part of the job.
Well, yeah.
Yeah.
Is that your understanding? Yours
Yeah.
personally, do you understand that?
Well,
they're
that's
meant
what
to
we're
be?
told.
We the public, they trust, we entrust them.
Absolutely, of course we do. Because the job
Because you pay
description
them for
is
it.
really about it. Exactly. The point is, of course they are. Of course they're entrusted with that. So the key then is that if they don't fulfil that, what do we have? We've got a breach of trust, which we then can act on in trust jurisdiction with no limited liability for a breach of trust. And you can apply it to anything. Okay, so it doesn't have to be big, massive matters. You can apply it in family law, you can apply it in all these places where people have been experiencing obstacles because of people hiding behind the filing cabinet or whatever. You can drag it into the trust arena and deal with it as a matter of trust. And this is what we've been toying around with. And we've had judges walk out as soon as we've had them. So what we do, I'll tell you how I tested this first of all. What I did was, I went in to court with my badge and my clipboard. These are badge that I made up. Says on it, People's Public Trust, Master Observer, Deojee. It's got my seal on it, it's got my other bits and bobs on it. That's it. And I just put that around my chest. I went in with the clipboard, observer notes, and just sit there. And it started from there. And from doing nothing, by the way, not interacting, not doing anything, just amazing to see the difference in behaviour by having an observer there for the purpose of the public trust.
Just in the public gallery.
Just in the public gallery. Tell you what, you turn up at a court with a badge on, everybody knows who's there. They whisper it round. It's amazing. It's an amazing game to play. Absolutely amazing. We've had judges, and then as we've played it along, we've had other people going into court as the People's Public Trust who are there to make sure that the British people are getting value for money and quality of services from their public servants, which is really the premise of it. If you were having a problem with various other suppliers, you would change supplier, wouldn't you? So what we're saying with our public servants is, well, we can't do that, but what we can do is observe and remind you that you're entrusted with providing quality, value for money, a humanity in service, things like that. Yeah? And then we invite them to challenge that if that's what they say, if they don't think so. Because they say, oh, what, you don't think you'd bring a humanity to service? Would what about your mother? Do you not want your mother to have a humane service when she calls the council? Is that what you're telling me? You don't want your mum to have a nice ear when she phones the police? Do you really believe that, officer? Are you really telling me that? Because it's funny, because this is the position some of them behave as if that's the case, and it's about us putting it into everyday language and making it not a challenge of authority, but one of humanity and community. Because there is no us and them. There's only us and us, because when they finish their shift, where are they living? A few streets away. So it's crazy what's going on just now, this whole us-them thing. There's no them, where are they? So what we're trying to do with the public trust is make it us. And we're saying, well, actually, and it's not a trick, it's not a game, this isn't a Freeman solution. This is about, actually, the fundamentals of our relationships with our bloody employees and our representatives that we've entrusted to make our communities a nice safe place for our children to be, a nice safe place for our wives and partners to walk about safely and all the rest of it. Does anybody not think that they're paying to have those things enforced? And if not, what do you think your money's for? It doesn't matter that some idiot, some immature or irresponsible or whatever nutter has usurped the role. The point is, what did you understand the role to be? Because that's what you're paying for. There's no contract here, is there? No, it's a trust. So the point is, if your trust has been broken, then you have grounds to act under breach of trust. So what I've been trying to do for the last few years is rally up support for taking representative actions for breaches of trust at a big level. And it's amazed me how much interest there is in it. It amazed me. It surprised me, because to me the issue was I was being sucked into one of my own spells. People were wanting me to start this organisation, make a big company happen and all the rest of it, make the People's Public Trust into this big thing that would send people and blah blah blah, and I realised that this was me getting sucked into this spell of my own creation and making me do a job that I really didn't want to and didn't have the skills for. I'm not some corporate process designer or something like that. But what we realised was there is a way to make the People's Public Trust exist nationally, which it can, because it is ready for a launch. It's ready for a launch in regions all over the country, but from people who are acting off the grounds of their own trust feeling broken. This is a sovereign movement. It's not meant to be about me saying, come on, get behind me and let's all join this company. It's meant to be about us all acting on our own sense of injustice. Well, that's what I thought anyway. You know, if I need you to act on my sense of injustice, and it's like, well, actually, that's going to fall over me, because as soon as I do something that you're not interested in, you're going to drop away. You know, really, you need to be acting on your sense of injustice. So that's where I'm at now with the People's Public Trust. And we had a meeting a few weeks ago where we devised what we want to do with observers in the coming months so that the factions can start up in various counties. Because the reality is we're ready to start at launching like 20 counties easy. We'd have people turning up outside police stations, courts, all the rest of it, council offices, introducing the People's Public Trust, and then people who are willing to go and observe and all, and you know, just off their own back, and then write reports and contact people who have been behaving improperly and all the rest of it, and pursue litigation, which is obviously what we want to do at the highest level. But what really got me is the amount that people want other people to do. And that's why I'm really bigging up this sovereignty point. The sovereignty point is about saying, well, if you feel moved, if you feel done over, then you're the one that needs to be acting, not waiting for somebody else to do it. I was talking about this stuff in the PPT to, you know, at the Occupy movement in London. I was on the steps of St Paul's and I was doing the whole Holocaust Thai and trans thing. There was a few hundred people there. And they were an interactive crowd. I had them all on board. And I had them all, you know, I need to check the time, sorry actually, what time is it? 8:30, right, okay, yeah, about 4 minutes. Right, so I was at St Paul's doing all this stuff, and you know, there was a couple hundred people there, and they were all agreeing as we were going along. Everybody agreed, they were all vocal, all this sort of stuff. But then when I said to people, who wants to come and sign up for a representative action? How about tomorrow we can go after whichever public servant signed the thing that said let's bail the banks out, we can go after them and say that was misrepresentation. Because does anybody here think it represented the well-being of their family to bail those banks out and make all these cuts? Not in the least, absolutely, okay. Right? Now, that was the same with this crowd. I asked everybody, please step forward because I want to understand the position of the people who feel like they've been served by this decision. I do, I want to understand it. It's like brilliant. At least if there's somebody, I'd like to chat to you about it. I've said this to over 1,000 people, a few thousand people, sorry?
He's an Irish journalist for the ECB bank, you know?
No.
So your YouTube videos just at YouTube there. There's a meeting in Ireland and it's the ECB guys, he's at 12 by the way, 14 in a good day maybe. And he's here representing the European Central Bank. And it's a hard-bitten Irish journalist asked the question, bailing the banks out, it wasn't us you're bailing out, we were bailing the banks out. How does that benefit Irish people? And this guy just point blank refuses to answer the question.
Yeah, because it cannot, it does not. Now the thing, what really got me, and this put me on to this big spin, which is why I gave you the big talk at the beginning about the spells and what's going on in your head. Because for me, what it really irritated me, that I had 300 people, a couple hundred people, I don't know how many there were, a few hundred people, all saying, yeah, that didn't represent me, blah, blah, blah. Then I went on to tell them about Iceland, and how Iceland successfully kicked the banks out. Did you all know that? Yes, that's why you don't get to hear about what went on in Iceland anymore, because they kicked the banks out. So what I would say to these people was, we can do that, we're an island, it's not much bigger than Iceland, we've got obviously a bit of a bigger population, but we can do exactly the same thing, and we can do it tomorrow. Come on, sign up, I'll take the case, come forward. And about a dozen out of those 300, a couple hundred came forward. And I mulled that over for ages. And I know some people were saying, oh, it's because they're afraid. And other people were saying, oh, it's because they're busy. And other people were saying, oh, you know, different people are doing different things. And I thought, yeah, I accept all of those things. I really do. I said, but you know what? If the shit is not hitting the fan enough for people right now, then actually for them to feel moved to say, do you know what? I'm going to put my personal stuff aside for a bit because we've got a common problem that we need to deal with here, folks. And it ain't going to go away. And it's really seriously affecting our communities and our well-being and we need to act on it, right? As long as people are still thinking that it's A-OK to be pursuing all these little petty whatever channels, then I'm sorry, I've now concluded everybody deserves what's coming. They deserve it. And I've realised that it's actually, I've got a name for it now. I'm calling it Messiah Complex, right? Because you've got a bunch of people who've gone through and they've thought they're the Messiah, right? You've got David Icke, you've got Bill Hicks, you've got Terence Trent D'Arby, you've got David Shayler, you've got all these people who have said it, right? And most people who've had awakenings will have believed it at some point or another to do with Christ consciousness, what that means, all the rest of it, but that's a different point altogether. But what I've realised is everybody knows about that half of Messiah complex. I clicked on to the fact there's another half. And the other half is that for everybody who's sitting waiting for somebody else to do it, something that you've identified as wrong in the world and you deeply know is wrong, and you're waiting for somebody else to do it, that's Messiah complex. You're waiting for some saviour to come and do it for you. You're waiting for some knight in shining horse or something like that, and it's like, well, evidence today in your life, do you think that is going to turn up? This is it. This is why you're all in the sovereign movement. This is why you're all in it. It's because you've already concluded that. You need to look at yourself. But what I'm trying to invite you to do is to extend it a bit further and to see the plight that we're in. Because here we are, we're now in 2012. This movement's been going for a while. What really got my goat was Mike Dobson was convicted of terrorism. None of you will hear about it. It's a gagging order on the case. I was there as an observer in the day. It was a ridiculous state of affairs. I'll just give you a very, very brief summary. And that is that Mike was convicted for having files on his computer because he's a hobby rocketist. Okay? He's a hobby rocketist. Sorry?
It was the anarchist cookbook, he was only in possession of it.
No, there were 6 articles they nailed it down to. They had a few hundred initially, which included things like, cheers for that though, you're right, the anarchist cookbook's one of them, but there were 6 in total that they'd refined it to on the day of sentencing. They had loads more up until that point, and they included things like a video from an American professor at law telling you why you should never talk to the police.
I've seen that.
Okay, that was on the original charge sheet. That was on the original charge sheet, okay? Now they did drop that, but it was there. Now, at the end of it, he did have 6 articles on there. One of them's Anarchist Cookbook, a bunch of other ones were there. But here's the key point. Repeatedly throughout that case, they said, you're known to not be a part of any terrorist organisation, you're known to not be a part of any political association, you're known to not be a part of any plot, any plan, any target, to have to pass the information from anybody, to have passed it to anybody. We know the information is freely available to download on the internet, and we know you've not looked at it since Windows was installed in your machine 2 years ago.
Did they mention the commercial lien that he had against Lancashire Police?
No, they didn't. But the point, I think that's irrelevant. I think the points I just mentioned are relevant because, and I know that is an element of it. He does have a lien against the police. But what they've now done is, you look at those things I just listed there, right? Now, the charge is possession of items or articles that could be useful to somebody who may be planning an act of terror. Okay, the definition of now the judge in Mike's case specifically said, and he quoted the judge who had heard the most terrorism cases out of any judge, and Lord Calvert-Smith or something like that, and he said, Lord Calvert-Smith has said that this offence can be committed in an infinite number of ways. Now when you consider Ian Puddock's video, okay? Ian Puddock's video is what? 7-7 was an inside job. That's terrorist item now, because he was charged with an act of terror. So there's Mike, not looked at these articles in 2 years, you know, blah blah blah, all the rest of it, he's doing 18 months. Okay? That was repeated 3 times. Now, if they tried to pin that on some Pakistani guy called Mohammed, right, freely available to download the internet, not a part of any terrorist organisation, political organisation, religious organisation, not a part of any planned plot target, not pass the information from anybody, not to anybody, they tried to do that to anybody else that had been an international human rights outcry. They've done it to an Englishman called Mike, and everybody is sitting on their arses, right? Now what got me was the people who were there, the people who were meant to be closest to him, when I next spoke to them, they wanted to talk about monetising liens again, and they're talking about commercial bonds and how the bank thing's moving and all the rest of it. And I'm like, this is it. This is the same as St. Paul's. This is exactly it. I went to see Mike on Monday. He's doing all right, but he's in jail. Now, I'm sorry, if we can't use this stuff to get people like that out, then what use is it? Is it a story worth telling? Sorry?
How can we help him?
I don't know. When I asked him on Monday, he felt he had it under control. He felt like that has sold, you know, you guys are getting, you're the first people I've spoken to since I saw him. It was literally a couple of days ago. So he's in good spirits, he's doing well, he's making good connections, he's got lots of cool books that you couldn't get on the outside because they've got a lot of legal books that he couldn't afford. So he's got them all out of the library, so he's enjoying that. He's got a current Archbold, he's got a current magistrate's book and all the rest of it. He had Archbold 2012 that he was buzzing off. So for those of you that are in the know on that, that's something he's happy about. So he's keeping himself occupied, buried in all of that, and he recognises he's got to use the time well. But his own, because he pled guilty to the facts, which was, yeah, I had them on my computer. You know, he pled guilty to the facts on that. They just ticked the guilty box. So that obviously gave him no route to appeal and no jury for his trial, because he pled guilty to the facts. So be very, very careful with that, because they don't have a guilty to the facts box. Okay? So when you say that because your word started with not and not with, you know, it started with guilty and not with not, then they tick the other box. So be very careful of that in your own stuff, because you could deny yourself the right to a trial at Crown Court by pleading guilty to the facts. If you plead not guilty, you can at least get yourself a jury for certain cases. I was never served personally this gagging order. I heard it rhetorically. So because of that, I've already said this on camera a number of times. I'm on Sky tomorrow night live for a couple of hours. It'll be getting said there as well, because it's a complete injustice. And if people can't see that that's just one that we've heard about, what are the other cases that we've not heard about that are all about implementing incredibly oppressive legislation against the people of this country? Sorry? Norman Scarf, Ian Puddick, Rusty, various other ones like that. You know.
Rusty I was thinking about, because they tried him in his absence with a jury.
Yeah.
Now, if
No
this
defence.
is not a show trial, then I don't know what is. Yeah.
This is the thing, because for things like this is what I was trying to say to Mike on Monday, and that is that there's, because he's basically going to be acting on a habeas corpus, he's going to be doing habeas corpus and going for errors of process. The problem is errors of process is endemic now. None of them are following the rules, okay, none of them. If we want to have any victory on that, I think representative action, is the way to go, and that's where everybody feels like they've not had proper process, document it properly, and I mean document it properly, and then let's all bundle them together and take the case. But it's a case that we have to stop rather than stamping our feet and saying, right, we've got to do the difficult bit now, and we've got to actually structure it and take the actions. Because otherwise, what do you want to do? You know, what's the objective? Are we all going to run into hippie communes and wait until they come banging down the door?
They are scared of representative actions, that scares them.
Yeah, representative action is what they don't want us to do. And that's what's so annoying me, because I'm not doing anything else other than representative actions. I'm not starting any company, I'm not starting any organisation, I'm running my own events, which I'll talk about in a minute, I'm doing all that sort of stuff, but I am not otherwise bothering. I don't want any more of their junk story in my head. It's a junk story of the world, it's a junk story of human beings and how they can get on and how they can interact with each other, and I've had enough of it. That's my sovereignty, boom. Not letting it in here anymore. I'll engage with it as much as I need to, but that's it. More interesting things I'd like in my head. But don't get me wrong, if you've got the buzz of the maze, if you're in it, if you're in the war room, finding a way out, and you've got that sense that you're hungering towards something, then go for it. Pursue it, because it can take you to great places, and it is about the point of, you know, I'm only saying this to the people who've been in it for a long time and are maybe going beyond the point of usefulness. Which is what normally when I'm, you know, talking to groups, a lot of them are well established. So you've got people who have already spent a few years of their life on this stuff. And I'm just saying to them, it's just an invitation to say, shall we just stop and reflect for a moment and, you know, make sure we put this in context and balance our time and our energy and all the rest of it a bit more effectively. Right, anyway, yeah, public trust. So yeah, anyway, the idea that people's public trust is that it's an unincorporated association of the private people of these lands who feel like their trust that they had placed in their public servants has been broken or breached in some way, and them acting on it. Quite simple, pretty straightforward. Any of you could do it. Now, there will be things like, you know, badges and advice and all the rest of it available in the coming months, but I've been saying that for ages. What I've realised is that actually the spirit of what the trust is about is already out there, it's already in the public arena. There's audios, there's talks that I've done. This isn't an introductory talk, this is a bit more of an advanced talk. You guys are getting this sort of, I don't know, I've been doing this a year talk, and come on, what's going on, folks, you know, because I've seen a lot of groups, and, you know, the percentage of people coming forward has really hit me. And I had a bit of an epiphany over the winter period there, because I realised that what I was hearing from people could be summarised as, authority isn't listening. Right? People were saying authority is basically not listening. My paperwork's not getting listened to, I'm not getting listened to when I'm in the venue, the council's not listening to me, my mum's not listening to me, whatever, all this, nobody was listening. And I suddenly realised, and I was looking around the groups that I was in, the people that I've known for years and blah, 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 and I realised that actually, it's a reflection. Because people were talking about having an ever more inhumane experience from their public servants and the corporations they were dealing with. And the authority in those places wasn't listening to them in their plight. And then I realised, and I turned the tables and I said, well, where is your humanity on a daily basis when you're walking down the street? Where is your humanity when you're standing in the short queue or whatever? Because each of us has the power to make our community a nice, happy, humane place with the people that we deal with. And it's just a rhetorical question for reflection. It's not an accusation or a finger-pointing exercise, but it's just to say, where is ours? Because for everybody that I know, they all drip-feed it. We all drip-feed our humanity. We decide when we're going to show it, when we're not, who gets the cold face, who gets the nice, friendly, approachable me, and all the rest of it. So the funny thing is, if we ask ourselves to reflect upon our ever-decreasing humanity in the public arena because of oppression, because of fear, and because of all these things and scaremongering, what I'm suggesting is I wonder whether we've been tricked into somebody else's spell. And actually, they've got us to think these things, so we're manifesting an inhumane world for ourselves. Sounds a bit of a head masher there, but I thought I'd just tell it how it is. But that's only one part of it. The other part of it is, if I can remember now that I've said that, what was that bit? Oh, it's starting to go now. So, what did I say a minute ago? Pop quizzes. This does happen to me a lot, so...
Representative actions that you want to...
Representative actions, yes, thank you. And then after that I was talking about inhumanity and also authority. And so then realised that the question of authority was an interesting one as well. Because then I realised that if I asked people, because I was looking at myself honestly as well, and seeing where I fell short and fall short, and trying to be honest and saying, actually, can we have a really honest conversation about some of this stuff, because some stuff isn't matching up, and I think we're putting our energy into the wrong arenas. I think we could rehumanize things a lot quicker by being a bit more human ourselves than by writing demanding letters and notices. And I think the issue of authority, if I ask groups of the so-called awakened, which I'm often invited to speak to, and I'll say to them, okay, how much of what you have learned in the last 5 to 10 years that you have felt deeply needs to be acted on and you now know, have you actually acted on and implemented in your daily life? So everything you've learned in relation to food, in relation to chemicalisation of food and all the rest of it, all the stuff you've learned in relation to your personal practices, diet, welfare, communication, interaction, all these things, everything that you've learned, all those things, how much of it is actually in play? And I think if most of us are honest, it's not 50%, is it? It's probably not even 20. And so then I realised that actually, what you're up against is a reflection of your authority not listening. The authority that dictates your daily life. And that was that sovereignty challenge I mentioned at the very beginning. That thing about what's going on that's determining your actions and your judgments and your conduct and all the rest of it. Because that is what is not listening to your demands for changes in behaviour, changes in practice, changes in what you want to do in your life, how you want to be in certain situations and all the rest of it. That's your authority. And I think we've probably got a bit of an easier challenge dealing with that authority first. I think if you can get the authority within yourself to listen first, you've then got a better chance of getting authority out there to listen. And again, it comes back to this whole spelling thing. Well, remember, what you are up against is not your perfected method. It's up against the certainty of the other person that their position is superior or better than yours. Obviously, a well-crafted missive, a well-crafted notice can do that, but it'll only get you so far. And other than that, it's going to come down to your ability to evoke the human being in somebody else who's standing in front of you. Because when it comes down to it, if you've got a couple of beat bobbies there, or you've got a couple of officers in the scene, or you've got a couple of whatever it is, when you're no longer dealing with the bits of paper, when you're dealing with a human being, what are you up against? You've got to connect with the human, don't you? You think about somebody in front of you, if they started stamping their feet and blah 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 and uttering whatever, how would you behave? How would you react? Would you be more human and relax with them and let them have their way, or would you be like, oh, well, this person's a bit of an arse, I'm just going to, yeah, whatever, mate. I've heard this 1,000 times, mate, I work in Salford. you know, or whatever. We've got a very subtle and interesting challenge ahead of us, and I don't think it's as clear cut as we thought up until now.
Is that not passive resistance then?
Is what not
Yeah.
passive resistance?
You know, if you're confronted by half a dozen very aggressive police officers, your instinct tells you to become aggressive towards them as well. If you come across as a poodle in that situation, you try and be nice to them, they'll just be even more aggressive with you.
I agree.
Boys only recognise that.
This is the challenge of sovereignty, and this is what, when I talk about reclaiming the master title, I don't mean it whimsically. I don't mean that I'm some cowboy who's standing there trying to stand in and be master. Yes, I'd love one. Thank you, Magnus, please. I'm not talking about that, and this is why for years, for the first year and a half of using the master title, I'm working with just a very small group of people and trying to use it in courts and all the rest of it. We didn't publicise it because of the reason that we felt there was too much anger in the movement, there was too much petulance, there was too much petulant sort of, I've been shafted, I'm angry about it. That's not the behaviour of the employer. You know, the point is, if you want to get in the headset of the employer, does the employer rise to the bait of the servant? Of course not. Of course not. But the problem was, if we unleashed a whole bunch of angry masters, it would devastate the work completely. Absolutely annihilate it. And what was lucky was, by the time we did start talking about it, which I did anyway, I started talking about it after about a year and a half of using it. It was then very carefully, and I realised quite quickly that I was at least putting it across with enough gravitas that people realised that if you are going to use it, you've got to be ready for the kind of rabid dog that is our public service to not be happy at the fact that you're trying to assert yourself as master, and be ready to behave appropriately in that case, because it's not about a picking match and it's not about a fight, of course it's not, but it is about your conduct and it is about how you hold yourself. And that's the thing about it. Mastery isn't about a method. That's the whole point of the master title, and the whole point of the journey that you're just beginning as you start to challenge authority. And it's not about getting your way, and it's not about being able to out-argue somebody else. And I don't have, and I can't name what it is, this is the point. And in these situations, because I'll tell you what's really interesting, thank you. Oh, that's all right, cheers. Because one of the interesting things is that time and time again, you have different people using exactly the same method and getting completely different results. And it's because different people at the other end every time. So you can automate the bits of paper, and we might all receive the same looking letter from the council because every one of them is just a P for print on the computer screen. Yeah, that's it. That's not the same when the person reads our letter, because it's a human being reading the letter. They might just press P for print on the return, but they are the human being reading it. Some of them are moved by what we say and some aren't. That's what it boils down to. So is it about your method? No, it's not. I've seen the same in court. I've seen people say exactly the same words and get completely different results. It's not about your method, it's about you. It's about how you hold yourself, how you conduct yourself, how you respect yourself and those around you and all the rest of it. And that'll get you a million miles further than some perfected phrase. Did everybody grasp that as conceptually?
Absolutely.
Yeah, and this is it, because this is it, again, this is your sovereignty. Sovereignty isn't something you learn, it's not something that's a badge. It's something that it's a journey, it's not even a journey, it's a process. It's a process of you facing, your own place in the world. Anyway. People's public trust, that's what I came here to talk about. Right, I can't just talk about it, because obviously the talks on the people's public trust are out there. You can hear about the introductory ones and stuff that goes into much more detail about how it can operate and all the rest of it. That's available to you guys if you want to go and check it out. If you just look me up on YouTube, Darren Deojee, or People's Public Trust, it's Deojee. There's no other whiteboard to write it on, Deojee. You can go to peoplespublictrust.com. So that sort of introductory stuff is out there. But I've been doing a lot of talks recently, and none of them have been about the PPT, because I've been feeling quite moved by what I've learned recently and watching what's actually coming up for people in their lives. People's lives are getting very intense. People having a lot of emotional, relationship-based stuff to deal with, they're having family stuff to deal with, they're having work stuff to deal with, and it's like, do you really have that amount of time to spend on a bit of notice writing for just a few small matters? We need to keep talking about the new stuff as well, not just the old stuff. So that's what I want to do a little bit tonight. Anyway, I think what we'll do is have I'll wrap up on the people's public trust just for a second, and then have a very quick break and take any questions, if that's all right. Yeah. So what is a People's Public Trust? Yeah, unincorporated association of private parties. It's a private trust that's trying to manoeuvre in the public arena. For those of you that makes any sense to. So what that means is that any of you can act in the name of the public trust. If you want any bits and bobs to do with it, get in touch please. peoplespublictrust.com, sign up there, or you can sign up with me tonight. Any donations that are received go towards the fuel cost to go and talk about it, but also any of them then go into the cases that we're helping with. It's totally limited. Sadly, we're not in the utopian ideal place where everything can be done for free yet. If we want to have the banners to turn up at court with, or we want to give people badges or whatever, that does cost a few quid, so if people want to chuck into that, that'd be great. We're hoping to have things that are much more fun, like bumper stickers and stuff, within a few months. And if anybody wants to volunteer with helping out in your area, either observing or being a contact, or getting involved and saying, well actually, if everything's much simpler if we can just get these public servants to do their bloody job, you know, and deal with it on that basis, then, you know, please come and speak to me and get in touch, sort of thing. But thank you very much for your time and attention up until now. I'm going to go and sit and have this drink. Everyone can have a smoke break, refresh themselves, you know, make this place keep running by giving the barman some money. And if we meet back in what, 10 minutes, if that's okay? Yeah. That gives a refreshing break. Thank you, everyone. Stories earlier. There's the stories that everybody's talking about, and then there's all the stories that nobody's talking about, but everybody knows about. And that's a really funny thing, because which of the stories which really count? You know, it's very, very ironic, because we've got, so I do a lot of stuff about mastery of the bodies, mastering the aspects and things like that, and then we have different aspects of self, obviously, because the place where you feel is different from the place where you go to the toilet and well, that feels like an eating, and that's different from how you think. And they're all about different sort of aspects of self that all have their own different needs and agendas, and we're trying to navigate between all of these different sort of... One of the interesting things, the most interesting emotion of all to me is anger, because it's the easiest one for us to understand how to get at some of the work that I do on my perception and language stuff, so I can't even talk about that tonight. But anyway, one of the key indicators is anger, because it's a really funny one. Because from the first time you started to show anger, you were told that it wasn't okay. So it might have been in the form of, don't speak back to me, or go to your room, or you don't get any food tonight, or whatever. So what that tells you as a very young child is that who you are isn't good enough, and how you express anger isn't good enough. So what happens to people in the instance of anger is that right now, everybody in this room will have their own unique way of expressing it. Some of you will shout and storm and run and rage. Some of you will go dead quiet. Some of you might make a crap cup of tea next time for that person. Some of you might, spit in their food, or not invite them out for dinner next time, or something like that. But you'll do a billion different things, except say, I'm angry with you because of this. But you'll be happy enough to say, oh, I'm really glad you did that, thanks, I appreciate it. But to say, I'm angry with you because of this, as that energy is moving through you, that's a different kettle of fish altogether. That's some of the challenges of mastery for you. But it's really interesting because the same energy gives rise to 1,000 different expressions, doesn't it? It's exactly the same energy. You're bloody angry. It's moving through you, but it can come out in countless different ways. And I wonder if this is the same story, but we're afraid to name it. And I wonder if this is what we're up against in the world. And we've got these big stories like aliens and reptiles and satanic cults and paedophiles and terrorists and all the rest of it. And it's like, guys, are we just scared to say that something's evil? Are we afraid to name what's evil anymore? Are we afraid to say, well, what is evil? Do we know what it is? People talk about good and bad and terror and all the rest of it. What's evil? How is that different from bad? If any of you have heard of M. Scott Peck, he's a brilliant author, American psychiatrist, sold millions of bestseller books. We have a book called The Road Less Travelled, fantastic book on human love that he writes from the perspective of a psychiatrist using case studies, and it's brilliant. And he does another book called People of the Lies, which is about human evil, also using case studies as an example, and they're brilliant. And in his second book, as he's talking about evil, he talks about coming to terms with things. And he says to come to terms with something is to come to the name, because the term for it is a name. And so when you're a teenager and you don't know how you feel, and your mum and dad say, well, you know, how are you doing? How do you feel? And you're like, I don't know how I feel. You know, it's because you haven't come to terms with how you feel. And in his second book he addresses, is that the case with us, with evil? that we haven't come to terms with it anymore. We don't know what it is. And he talks about bad, and he says, bad's easy, bad's obvious. And you spot bad a mile away. Oh, you can spot bad, that's easy to spot. But what is evil? How's that different? Because evil pretends to be doing good, bad doesn't. Evil pretends to be doing the right thing. Evil tries to put a nice sweet smile on its face on itself. And we've all tasted it, we've all touched it, we've all been it. But the thing is, we have to start getting ready to name it, because you can't have the conversation with your granny about 7-foot reptiles ruling the country and expect us to unify our communities and do something about it. But if we want to talk about maybe addressing evil, maybe we can, I don't know. But are we willing to face it? Are we willing to talk about it? And again, it's all about these spells and all the rest of it, and stories, and being effective. And really, I don't care what works, I just want something that's going to work. I just want to have a conversation about something we can agree on. Because that's what I'm trying to do with all of these things, is find common agreement. Public servants, are they meant to serve the community? Can we have common agreement? Right, can we do something about that? Because at least we agree about it. Because everything else we disagree on, don't we? We disagree on when it's appropriate to come back, when it's appropriate to finish, how many drinks to have, blah, blah, blah. We disagree on everything else. That's our sovereignty. But we're never going to collectively achieve anything by celebrating that. We have to find a common thing to act on. So representative action, next week, here, Michael of Bernicia, Legend of a Man in These Lands. He'll be here talking about mortgage representative action. So if any of you have mortgages, or you know people who have mortgages, who feel defrauded by the fact that banks that haven't given you anything, they're going to reclaim, try and double the money off you for that, in an act of outright fraud, then come along and listen to this man and join up with what he's doing. Because it's it's important work. It really is important work. So he'll be here next week. If you're interested in the sort of representative actions that I'm interested in, which is about trying to get proper public servants in there and deal with the ones that aren't, because I'll tell you what, we've had judges walk out as soon as they've heard that People's Public Trust and what they're for. We've had a guy get to go back with his daughter after not having her taken away for 7 years, and just by having an observer in there in the family courts, she got to go home with him. We've had various other things that just seem to increase the humanity out there. And for those of you who are interested, it's very much about quantum mechanics. It's just about having an observer. You don't need to do anything. It's about being there and just noting. Okay, it's not about confrontation. It's not about picking fights. It's not about us and them. And the point is, when I am dealing with public servants, I like to remind them that we're in the same community. That sometimes I'm serving, sometimes you are. We're all mutual beneficiaries of the same trust. If we start to work that way, we'll find that there is no them. And that's really what I want to get at, because I'm not into abandonment of infrastructure. I'm not into separatism and all that sort of stuff. I think we can find points of common agreement that can, find out, build a healthy community. But anyway, look it up, watch the other videos, Darren Deojee on people, on YouTube, People's Public Trust, my own website for my own events, which the People's Public Trust and all the stuff I've been talking to you about tonight is really just the tip of the iceberg of getting into the real substance of your life and all the stuff that I've been hinting at. And if you want to look at some of it and gain the tools to navigate it and get into that and get into your power, then get in touch, because I do regular things on perception, which is all about your reactivity and finding your power in space. I do stuff on gender and relationships. We've got a workshop going in Manchester at the end of the month, which is about navigating your interaction, your communication, and